Hello and thanks for joining me. I'm making this video because I want to talk about some new legislation that's being proposed by the European Union, which, as I read it, it seems that it will effectively ban motorcycles over 15 years of age. Classic and vintage motorcycles that I know many people who watch this channel enjoy. The thing that surprises me is that no other motorcycle channels that I've seen seem to be talking about this. So, whereas I normally don't really go into this kind of political stuff, I just feel it's important to get this out there. Now, I'm sure you're already aware of the legislation that's in place that says that after 2035, you will no longer be able to buy a new ICE, internal combustion engine vehicle. And also, hopefully you're aware that this is not a hard cut-off as such, that there's more of a phase in it. So from this year, 2024, manufacturers will have to sell a certain percentage of electric vehicles, otherwise they incur high fines, and that percentage gradually ramps up to 2035, such that it will become more and more difficult to buy new internal combustion engine vehicles, i.e. petrol motorcycles, as we get closer to 2035. And I know many bikers are just saying, well, I'll hold on to my older bike and just keep riding that. And particularly if you already own a bike which is quite old, as most of mine are, they say, well, just keep it going to the end of my riding days. But it seems that the EU is now working on legislation to stop us doing that. The EU has this programme which it calls Fit for 55. And the idea is to eliminate all internal combustion engine vehicles by 2050. So we won't be able to buy new ones after 2035, and then after another sort of 15 years after that, they want to get all internal combustion engine vehicles off the road. And they're doing this by proposing legislation that they're calling the management of end-of-life vehicles. So clearly, if you ride a bike that's 15 years old, it's deemed to be at the end of its life. In this proposed legislation, they define this concept of what they call a residual vehicle, which is basically a petrol motorcycle, if we're looking at motorcycle particularly, that is still on the road after 2035. So after you can no longer buy new ones, if you're still riding a petrol bike, then it's termed a residual vehicle. So what this new legislation is proposing, and I say this is proposed legislation, it hasn't gone through yet. What they're proposing is that if this vehicle suffers a major breakdown, and they define that as something to do with the engine or the transmission, the brakes, the steering, which obviously is more relevant to cars, or the chassis, which obviously is relevant to cars. For bikes it would be a frame. Then you're not allowed to repair it. Repairs are banned. Once that vehicle is 15 years old, if you have any kind of failure in any of these areas, then it will be illegal to repair it. Now, this agenda is being sold to us under a positive guise, as they always are. So it's been sold to us as about facilitating the repair of older vehicles, and of course, inevitably, it's been sold about as being more sustainable and responsible with our vehicles. But essentially what it says is that if you have a vehicle which is more than 15 years old after 2035, and it needs some major repair to it, you are not allowed to repair it, nor are you allowed to sell it. It must be scrapped. So think of all the barn-find bikes that have been sitting around which need restoration. You won't be able to sell them. It would have to go to scrap. If you have an old bike that breaks down, it would be illegal under this legislation to repair it, restore it, all the kind of major restorations that we all do. You know, I know a lot of people who watch this channel enjoy doing with older bikes, rebuilding them, that sort of thing. Under this new proposed legislation, all of that would be illegal, and I find that rather concerning. Yeah, so, well, I'm not anti-electric vehicles, but even if you support the idea of zero emission policy and think that we should all go electric, I have two major issues with this proposed legislation, which I just want to set out briefly here. The first issue is that it's now very well established factually that the CO2 emissions associated with continuing to keep an older internal combustion engine vehicle on the road are less than those that will come from building new electric vehicles, and that's particularly the case with classic cars and classic bikes that are actually not ridden that much, so they're not really producing that much in the way of emissions. You know, many classic cars and bikes do very few miles, they just go to shows, things like that. So, but they would all be covered by this legislation as it stands. Okay? And my second reservation is that this is yet another restriction. Sorry, just wiping the camera there. This is just yet another restriction on our freedoms and rights that is being pushed through in the name of environmental policy. Even if you support the idea of reducing CO2 emissions, there's no clear evidence that the people who keep classic and vintage vehicles make any kind of significant contribution towards CO2 emissions, and it's laughable in comparison to, you know, the CO2 emissions that we see from other sources. Yeah, so I could rant on more about this, but I'll stop here because I just want to make this short video to put this out here. This proposed legislation from the EU, this Fit for 55 programme, and this management of end-of-life vehicles is quite concerning, and nobody seems to be talking about it. So please let's get it out there and make some noise about this. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, check out some of my other videos. Please give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel. Very few people who watch my videos actually subscribe, so it would be nice if more people subscribed. Anyway, please ride safe and hopefully see you again next time. Bye bye.